Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar on Tableau Prep. My name is Jess Lella. I'm a sales consultant based out of Los Angeles, and I'll be taking you through Tableau Prep today from start to finish. We'll be looking at some of the latest features that came out, as well as the basics to connecting to data, as well as some of the anticipated functionality coming in the very near future. Now, a little bit of background as to why we created this entirely new product into the Tableau suite is we kept hearing from our customers that they were really excited to get going with Tableau and start doing their analysis, but getting the data ready was the hard part. And a lot of us don't have that data engineering background, but we felt that you don't need that skill set to get your data ready. So we built Prep with that user in mind. And as we work in Prep, you're going to see that the interface is very interactive, very visual. It's a lot of that dragging and dropping that you're used to in Tableau Desktop. It's going to be very quick to get to those insights. You're going to get a little picture of your data before you even get into it in Desktop. I'll show you what I mean by that when we get into the product. And ultimately, it'll be pretty quick to get going with Prep and start building what we call these flows. Those are the data models we'll be creating today. And what are we going to be looking at when we start working in Tableau Prep? We're going to be looking at real estate data. So like I mentioned, I live in Los Angeles. I specifically live in Manhattan Beach, and anyone familiar with the area knows that although it's a very beautiful place to live, it's also very expensive. So if I wanted to stay in California, I might need to start looking at other places to live. So I grabbed data from all over the internet and decided to put together a little data set that would help me get a better picture of what this market looks like. But of course, grabbing files from the internet, some things needed to be cleaned up and massaged to fit together well. So we're going to use Prep to do that, to get those files ready and create a little data set about this real estate market. So let's get going and open up Prep. So you'll notice Prep is a separate install. And it's different from Desktop in the sense that I can tell that it's a little blue icon. It's separate from my white icon, which is Tableau Desktop. Let's open up a completely fresh instance of Prep. And you'll notice when I open up Prep, it's going to look a lot like Desktop. So we'll get this booted. You'll notice I'm working on the latest release as of this recording, 2019.1, which is going to be released as of, I believe, today, which is January 10th. It'll give it a second to load, and there we go. So you'll notice the interface is very similar to Desktop, where I have, again, we call these flows. So all the flows I've been recently working with or creating will be immediately readily available to me. I'll also have some sample flows, as well as some resources, some training resources, a demo video. I'm going to point you to where you can see more training videos at the end of this. But let's get started and connect to our initial data set, which is an Excel file. So when we connect to our data, you'll initially see that the connector list is a bit smaller than Desktop. We are working to get to parity, and we are releasing Prep on a much more regular cadence monthly. So this list is growing by the month, but those common data sources like flat files, SQL databases, cloud databases, you should find those here. We'll get started with our first data set, which lives in Excel, and it is this California real estate data. And we'll see there's 4 tabs here, but the one I'm interested in working with is this home price tab. So I can either double click or drag it into this right pane here to start getting going with this file and see what I need to clean up. So I can see a little summary of this file before I even get started. I see some sample data. I see how many fields I'm working with. So again, it's not too big, but I'm already seeing some things we might want to clean up, but we'll get to that very soon. Also worth mentioning how we're ingesting this data. So by default, we'll take a sample amount. I'm being mindful that when we are initially working with Prep, it is happening on our laptops. So a word of caution, if you have hundreds of thousands of records or millions, you might not want to use all the data, but go ahead, see if your machine can handle it. And again, I'll talk about at the end how this is changing in the future. So how would we start actually cleaning up this data set? When I expand this plus menu item, I'll see there's a few options here. We're going to be working with almost all of them today, but to really start cleaning this up, I'll go to add a step. Notice how we get a visual branch created as we start adding steps and, again, processes to this flow. Now what we see here is we get started with a nice profile pane. Again, it gives me some indicators as to what my data looks like before I even get into it. So I can see by the length of the bar or the length of the gray area that means I have more values here. So it makes sense I'd have more values or more territories lie in inner regions. Most counties go in inner regions, and we have a lot of homes that fall into that 200 to 300,000 range. And this is interactive, so if I select, what's this really expensive bucket, I can see that's San Francisco. If I want to see what these inner regions or Greater Bay Area is, I can see that data grid below is interactive and accurate as to my selections in the profile pane. I can also see we have 10 unique territories across 51 unique counties. So again, just little indicators. I can also resort this based on, number of records as well. But while we're working with this territory field, many of us might see what we might want to fix. We have some redundant category names, also some spelling errors. If I were to present this, I would want to clean this up and just make it a little more presentation ready. So when we want to clean up any of our fields, look at this ellipses, and we'll be working with most of these today. What I'd like to focus on for cleaning this field is the group and replace. Now I can manually select and group these territories, but we'll let Tableau do the work, and let's see if the pronunciation algorithm cleans this up for me. It looks like it did group 4 fields into 4 fields. We have 4 groupings, and we now have 6 unique territories, but this isn't quite what I wanted. Again, we have this abbreviation. If I was presenting this, wouldn't really look professional. So we'll go ahead, and we'll actually manually update the row-level data. Now this is very powerful and a big difference from Tableau Desktop, where if I wanted to edit row-level data, I'd have to go back to the data source. In Prep, I can do that right here. No need to go back to the original data set. I also notice that as I make changes, it's being logged. So I like this little audit trail that Prep keeps for me. If I ever want to roll something back, I could edit over it. If I opened up this flow after not looking at it for a while, I could very easily see what steps I took. And again, a little quick glance of that would be in each step as we go, we'll get little icons that tell us what steps were taken. So again, this paperclip might look familiar to some of us. In Desktop, that's how we define a group, is with that little paperclip icon. Now, my next thing I would want to clean up would be related to these dates. Now, this is very common in Tableau, working with Excel files, is they can go lengthwise on their dates, which wouldn't really be useful for my analysis. These will come through as 3 separate date fields. I wouldn't be able to do any trending, and it would just be a little messy to work with. So what I want is I want 1 year date field, and then I want my home prices, which is what these numbers are related to, as 1 column. So what we need to do here is we need to pivot these date fields. When I open up my menu items, I see that that is an option. I can add a pivot, and again, I can just grab and group, or drop, should I say, these 3 fields. So I'll grab all 3 of them, and we'll drop them in, and then we'll rename them to naming conventions that make more sense to us. So again, this will be year. We'll change the data type. So again, changing these data types on the fly is also something we can do in Prep. This would not behave as a date if I left it a string field, and we'll change this to home price. And we can notice that it didn't change any of the data, it just transformed it in a different way. So I still see that that bucket for 200 to 300,000 is still the most prolific category for our counties to fall into. While I'm working with this, I might want to remove any fields I know I'm not going to be using. Again, we want this data set to be as clean as possible. So I notice we have some change fields, some month-over-month change, year-over-year change. I can search to see how often that comes up. Looks like we have 4 fields related to change, percent change. Again, that might be a little more than I really need. So let's remove the month level detail, a little more granular than I'm looking to get into. It looks like we have a redundant change field. So we'll go ahead and we'll just remove those fields. We'll take one last look at this data set. We've cleaned it up quite a bit, and this looks like it's in pretty good shape. So we'll go ahead and we'll call this Home Prices Clean. Now, we haven't looked at descriptive data yet. We've looked at this Excel file, which has some home price information, which will definitely be useful. But I'd like to next see, well, are these desirable places to live? That resides in a flat file called grades. So now we'll start to see how we start integrating multiple data sets together. Now, this is a seemingly simple and small data set. Let's actually take a look and see what we might need to fix up. So we'll add a step just like we did earlier. And I can see we have each county, a little description of what that county's like, where it is, how is it graded. Again, I might want to take that into account. I might not want to live in a county that's in the D or C- range. But before I integrate that with my home prices, I need to clean this up, and then I need to think about how this will join nicely to that Excel file. So for one, I think we all see some dirty data here, definitely something I want to clean up. And again, this is a small file. Again, we only have 49 unique descriptions, but what if we had 50,000? A real case example would be our data set's probably a lot bigger. I'd want to globally change any dirty data inputs. So when I go to these menu selections, it will do that globally on the field. And in this case, we'll want to go to Clean, and we'll see that we have a few options here. Again, all of these very useful for a given time and place, removing letters, numbers, trimming spaces. But in this case, I want to remove the punctuation. So every time we have a punctuation mark, we will remove it. And it looks like it did just that. We'll just do one last check to make sure we grabbed it. And it looks like there's that no data. It got cleaned up nicely. And I can then, again, see, well, where was this related to? And not a huge surprise, looks like it was related to that null in grade. And I can see it doesn't happen anywhere else. So in this case, we can go ahead and we can just say no data. Now, otherwise, this data set looks like it's good to be joined to our Excel file. But I always like to make sure that when I do a join, I know the data will match up. I won't have any issues with things not joining properly. Now, there's a subtle change here that we're going to need to fix. So when I go to my Excel file, I see Alameda is a county we would be joining on in our state region field. But notice Alameda in our county name. It actually has the word county. So that extra text will cause my join to fail. So I have two options. I can either add the word county to my Excel file, or I could parse it out of my grades file as we see it here. Now, because we have built-in splitting functions in Prep, it's a little easier for me to just split out the values. But of course, I could create a calculated field and just add on that text if I'd like. But we'll keep it simple. Again, we want to do this as efficiently and quickly as possible. So we'll go to a custom split. We'll say, when we see the word county, let's split it off the first field. So essentially, we'll have a county name that says Alameda, and that is just the text that we want, using Alameda as an example. And there we have it. We parsed out that word county, and that join will work. But let's go ahead and clean this up. Again, we don't want redundant fields. And this is, again, a difference from desktop is we can remove calculations or the fields that's built off of a calculation. So this parent field is what this split was based off of, but that's okay. We don't need to keep it to keep that calculation accurate. We can remove it, and we can rename this county. And notice we don't get any errors. And we have a nice, clean, four-field data set that we can now join to our home prices. We'll call this grades. So again, you can add in text for each step in the process. And we can also add in descriptions again. So let's join this, and then we'll add in a little description. So we can join by opening up our menu option here, but I personally like to grab and drop and hover over, and we can union or join. Again, it makes sense to join in this case. We're not looking to union. We will get to that in a bit. And notice we get a new branch added, and we need to now define our join criteria. So I'll go ahead and say state region matches to county. Now, Tableau will do its best guess to make the joins happen and guess at that join clause. So if I had like named fields, it would match on those like named fields. In this case, state, region, county does not match to county, so I have to manually input it. And a hard part of joins, especially working with it in desktop, could be, are our fields matching up, or are things falling out of our join? Sometimes we come across it after we get into the data analysis, and then we have to fix our joins. So in prep, we try to make it as apparent as possible if things are getting excluded, for example, or is everything being included. In this case, we do have some exclusions, so we do have a problem here. Now, I can visually find the problem by scrolling and seeing that, well, it looks like anything in red means it's not matching. But again, this is a small data set. What if we had a lot more data and rows? I could select this box and say, well, actually show me the mismatch values here, and I could address them. In this case, it looks like we have a redundant field on LA. We already have LA in this Excel home price data set. So we can go ahead and we can just simply exclude it. I want everything to match up, and now we will not have any mismatched values. So we might want to add a little description here. So it's helpful up to 200 characters. We could add some notes. Again, very useful if someone else is looking at your work or you're revisiting it. So here I might say, joined flat files, ready for database tables. Whatever it may be. We could add a comment for each and every step, but that is a newer feature in these latest prep releases. Another newer feature is the ability to preview in Tableau Desktop. So maybe I've done a lot of work and I kind of want to start checking my work as I go. I can just hit preview, and I can see what is this going to look like when I open up Tableau Desktop. So at the bottom here, we'll get another book added, and here we have what we've done so far. So I can see as of now, my fields look good, everything looks clean, and I'm ready to continue my analysis with working with price index tables. So our next part of this is maybe we've whittled this down to a handful of counties that we're interested in living in, but I've saved those as database tables. So we'll have to get those tables, and ultimately we need to union them together. So let's go ahead and find those files. So we'll see how Tableau Prep works with SQL tables and then ultimately joining them to our flat files. So again, we can cross database join just like we do in desktop. We can do that in prep as well. So we'll select our schema, and we will find those home price index tables we're interested in working with. Give it a second to load here. There they are. Now notice we do have the custom SQL option as well. That question does come up sometimes. So we are interested in Los Angeles. These are acronyms: Santa Barbara, Sacramento, San Francisco. But working with these separately would be a little difficult. What I'd like is one cohesive data source. So we need to union these files together, or tables, should I say. Now I can manually drag and drop and union and do it that way, but the faster method, and again, especially if we're working with a lot of tables here, would be to wildcard union. I might want to union my files together based on naming convention. So again, I'll let this load. Or we could just bring them in. Looks like my wildcard union is going a little bit slow. And I can start manually bringing in these files. Now we want to make sure we do add. We don't want to actually create a new union. And we'll grab all of these files. So we just have two more. And we can see we get a nice big branch. Now if I did the wildcard union, we just have one union. But again, in essence, it's pretty much the same thing. It's also nice to see the color coding indicator, so I can see when I have mismatched fields. And this is going to be the next step we need to fix, is that we have, again, lengthwise data. We have all these different counties. What I'd like to see is just one field for county and one field for index. So just like we handled those dates, we are going to pivot all of these county fields so we can clean up this data set, make it a little bit easier to work with. So we'll add a pivot. We're going to do, just like we did earlier, we're going to take our different counties. I'm going to grab all of them. There's about 6 here. Remove that little indicator. And again, little scroll bar at the bottom can be a little bit small. And we'll grab all of these. Again, alternatively, I could search for them. That is also an option. Or we could just find them here. We'll remove the table names while we're at it. Again, we don't really need that level of detail. Drop them in. So it does have to hover into that little box here. Let's see how many we've grabbed. So we have a few more to go. We'll find those. We'll grab them. Again, you can multi-select by control clicking. I think that might be all of them. Let's over here, yeah. I think we grabbed, might have a few more hiding. I think we have Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, Sacramento. Okay, looks like we're in good shape to pivot these and then start renaming our fields. So we'll call this county. We'll call this home price. That's okay. Looks like we have county already. We'll just remove that redundant county. So it does give me that indicator if I do have redundant field names. We'll call this home price index. And while we're at it, we'll also change the data type to a decimal. So it behaves like a number. We'll remove this field. We don't need it. Let's go ahead and take a look here at what we've got. Looks like this data set is ready to be joined to our flat file data set. So we'll give it one last look. We'll go to add a step. I have my counties, I have my home price index, and I have my dates. So we'll call this home price index. And we'll go ahead and we'll join it to that flat file index that we created earlier. So again, I'm just going to grab and hover in. We're going to say, let's join these together. Now, when we do this join, I'm not expecting everything to match up. Again, we just isolated this to 5 or so counties, and I have 50 counties in my Excel file. So, of course, we're going to have mismatches. We'll make sure this looks like it is joining properly. Looks like it is. We'll make this a left join because we might still want to look at my other counties, but while also retaining our index counties as well. We might want to do a few separate analysis. So again, all this red that I'm seeing, I anticipated, and when I do have a match, I see it as black, as I expect. So let's go do one last clean, make sure we've grabbed everything, and then we'll run this flow. So we'll call this final output. And again, if I have any redundant fields, I want to get rid of those. So again, we already have county. We'll remove it. I do want to keep my index county, so I might want to look at those separately. But overall, this looks like it's in pretty good shape, and I'm ready to run an output. Because right now, all these steps that we've done, we're not actually running it. We're not computing those joins. We're not computing those groupings. That happens when I add an output. And we have two options here. We could save this flow as a file. So we'll choose our location. By default, it will go into your Tableau Prep repository. And if you're on 10.5 or later, you'll use our new Hyper data extract engine. If you're 10.5 and below versions, select a TDE, or you could use a CSV file option. The alternative is we could save this flow as a published data source. So we'll have to authenticate into our server. So we'll use our Tableau Online instance here. And we'll now use Data Server and create a published data source that we can access and also make available to others. So I'll sign in to my server. Of course, I'll have to select my site, and then we'll get this published. Okay, I'll also have to select the project. I'll give it a name. We'll call it January webinar on prep, so we can find it easily. And now we're going to run this flow. So now all those steps are computing, and Tableau Prep is smart enough to push it to the database where it's more efficient, or handle it in Hyper in Prep. And in this running flow step, it's also going to handle that publish process as well. So you run the steps and you publish if that's what you chose at the same time. So when you choose publish, it might take an extra few seconds than it normally would. and we'll have our browser window open with that data source that we just created. So I can see there is my prep webinar data source. Let's take a look at this in Tableau Desktop and see if all that work we did gave us a nice data source. We could start doing some analysis. So I'm going to open up Desktop, and we're going to connect to this file that we just made, and maybe make a sheet or two, kind of dig into some of this data, but we won't do too much. So there is that data set I just made 0 minutes ago. Open it up, and there we have a nice, clean data set. I can start working with this, start trying to identify what columns or what fields I've created and which ones I might want to work with. I'm looking at home prices. I can see those expensive counties on the coast. I want to see how they're graded. Again, I might not want to live in a county that's, again, C- or below. So there's a lot we could do with this data set, but again, the purpose of this really was to show how Tableau Prep works. So the next phase of this is a question many of us have after we create this flow is, well, what happens when I get fresh data? Well, as of now, if we got fresh data, you would have to press play again, refresh your data, press play, overwrite your file, and manually do that process. You can do it in there's a command line call you can do to schedule it, but it's not built into the UI until this beta release. So this is new functionality called Prep Conductor. This is how we schedule and automate those flows. So it is an add-on, pricing to be determined, but I will show you what that Prep Conductor looks like. So we're signed in to my server. I'm going to choose Publish Flow right under that menu item. I'll go to my sales site, and I'll say January webinar, again, so we can find it, and we'll publish it. So right now, this step is publishing the flow onto my server, and that's where I'm going to create that schedule. So those are familiar with making extract schedules, very similar process. So here I have a nice visual outlay of that flow that I just created, and I can manually run this. But what I'm really concerned with is creating a new task. This is how I schedule and automate this workflow to get fresh data, and it happens in the background. I don't need to think about it. When I select my schedule, it will just happen. So maybe I want this to happen on the 1st of the month, 1 a.m. We'll have it conflict with business hours. We'll create that task. Once I've successfully created that task, I don't need to worry about this anymore. The data will refresh. I'll have my flows. It's on my Tableau server as a published data set, and this workflow is just about finished. Now, for those of us on the admin side or project leaders, I just want to point out that adding flows to your server does add another level of admin duties. So for one, it is a schedule that is separate from extract refreshes. So notice there's flows and there's extract refreshes. You can't schedule a flow on an extract refresh schedule. You will need to make another one. And when you put flows on your server, you also have to permission them. So you'll see when I open permissions for a project, we have a new category, which is flows. So just be aware that that is added when you bring flows onto your server. Now, if you're curious to learn more on Prep, where to get it, I encourage you to go to our site, go to our learning portal. If you haven't discovered our free training videos, they are great. They are free, and they're pretty short little snippets for you to get started. We have about an hour's worth of content on Prep, covering a lot of what we talked about today. So if you missed something, you want to learn more about a certain step or something we didn't get to, definitely check out these videos. And if you'd like to get your hands on Prep, I'd encourage you to go to our products and try out a trial. For those of you who have had desktop before April 24th of 2018, you will have a 2-year free trial of Prep up until June 2020. So a lot of people already have access to Prep. If you are on our new role-based licensing model and you're a creator, you'll have Prep. So kind of 2 different buckets here. If you're not sure which one you fall into, if you have access, reach out to your Tableau server admin or reach out to your Tableau account team. We'd definitely be happy to get you pointed in the right direction. And hopefully this was helpful to see, how we connect to data, the workflows in Prep, how it connects with the server, some of that new functionality coming soon. So thank you for joining, and hopefully you'll get your hands on Prep soon. Thanks, everyone.